The cold silence of space erupted with a violent shimmer as the Zenthuri battlecruiser materialized just beyond Earth's orbital defense perimeter. Its hull gleamed like obsidian glass stretched over impossible geometries, a living machine that defied human understanding of engineering and biology. Inside the underground planetary command center, Captain Arya Chen watched the holographic display with a stillness that belied the hurricane of calculations racing through her mind. Her fingers, calloused from years of piloting experimental spacecraft, traced the intricate neural interface embedded in her left temple. The device, a marvel of human innovation, connected her directly to the global defense network, a system that was both weapon and nervous system. "Incoming transmission," announced Dr. Keiko Nakamura, the center's lead xenocommunications expert. Her voice was clinical, but a subtle tremor betrayed the magnitude of the moment. The Zenthuri had never before needed to send a message. Their previous encounters with other civilizations ended swiftly. Conquest was their language, extinction their punctuation. A holographic display flickered, resolving into a grotesque figure that was neither fully organic nor completely mechanical. The Zenthuri emissary appeared as a chimera of biological precision and technological augmentation. Its form shifted subtly, muscles and metallic structures moving in unsettling synchronization. Humanity, the being spoke, its voice a perfect simulation of communication that felt simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. "Your civilization has been selected for systematic integration. Resistance is a mathematical impossibility. Your technological capabilities represent a 0.03% potential threat level. Surrender is the most logical outcome." Arya's neural interface hummed. Decades of military training, coupled with the collective knowledge of humanity's most advanced AI systems, processed the transmission instantaneously. She recognized it not just as a threat, but as a calculated psychological weapon designed to induce immediate capitulation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, standing just behind Arya, leaned forward. Her background in xenopsychology and advanced game theory gave her insights that traditional military strategists could never comprehend. "They're not just offering surrender," she whispered into Arya's communication channel. "They're testing our psychological resilience." The command center held its breath. Hundreds of personnel from every nation, every background, connected through a web of technological and human innovation, waited for a response that would define humanity's future. Arya's neural interface began to compile a response. But this wouldn't be a typical military communication. Drawing from global communication networks, cultural databases, and real-time linguistic analysis, she crafted a message that was both a declaration and a statement of collective human spirit. When the response transmitted, it wasn't just words. It was a multilayered communication that would ripple across Zenthuri communication networks, a virus of human complexity that would challenge everything the conquering species understood about resistance, hope, and the fundamental nature of civilization. The first volley in humanity's fight for survival wasn't a weapon. It was a message that would make the Zenthuri question everything they knew about conquest. The Global Adaptation Response Center hummed with a different kind of energy. Not panic, but pure, directed potential. Dr. Imani Okoro stood before a massive holographic display that was more living ecosystem than computer interface. Her team represented a radical approach to planetary defense, a complete reimagining of how humanity could resist a seemingly insurmountable threat. "We're not building weapons," Imani explained to a group of international defense ministers and scientific leaders who had gathered virtually from around the globe. "We're building adaptive systems that can learn faster than the Zenthuri can predict." Behind her, the display showed rapid simulations of technological and biological innovations. Quantum computing nodes merged with biomimetic engineering, creating systems that could reconfigure themselves in milliseconds. Nanite swarms demonstrated the ability to transform from communication networks to defensive barriers, to medical support systems, all within the span of a breath. Dr. Rodriguez connected remotely, her image a holographic projection that seemed to move through the space with an electric intensity. The Zenthari operate on a principle of predictive conquest, she explained. Their entire civilization is built on mathematical models of resistance and submission. Our strategy must be fundamentally unpredictable. A young engineer named Marcus Chen, no relation to Captain Area Chen, unveiled a project that epitomized this approach. He had developed a neural link technology that wasn't just a communication tool, but a living, adaptive network. Traditional military communication relies on fixed protocols, Marcus explained. Our system learns, shifts, and reconfigurates with each interaction. It's less a communication network and more a living organism. The demonstration was breathtaking. The neural network displayed on the holographic interface seemed to breathe, pulse, and transform. It could instantly translate between human languages, predict potential communication barriers, and adapt its own structure to maximize efficiency. Simultaneously, in research facilities across the planet, other teams worked on equally revolutionary projects. A group in Mumbai developed adaptive environmental suits that could instantly reconfigure to any planetary condition. In Sao Paulo, researchers created bio-integrated weapon systems that could be grown rather than manufactured. A team in Nairobi designed quantum entanglement communication devices that could transmit information faster than light, using principles the Zenthari couldn't comprehend. Dr. Okoro understood the true weapon wasn't technology. It was the human capacity for collective, creative problem-solving. Each team worked independently, yet was connected through a global network of shared knowledge. The Zenthari's hierarchical, top-down approach would never understand this fluid, organic method of innovation. "We're not preparing for a war," she told the assembled leaders. "We're creating an entirely new paradigm of existence. The Zenthari expect us to fight. Instead, we'll evolve." A young researcher interrupted, her voice trembling with excitement. "The latest quantum simulations suggest we can create communication networks that exist in multiple states simultaneously. The Zenthari's predictive models won't just be challenged. They'll be fundamentally broken." The room fell silent. This wasn't just preparation for conflict. This was a fundamental reimagining of what resistance could mean. Humanity wasn't just preparing to fight. They were preparing to transform the very concept of warfare, of communication, of existence itself. Outside the Global Adaptation Response Center, the first prototype adaptive defense satellites began to orbit the Earth, living machines that were part technology, part organism, entirely unpredictable. The first true engagement was nothing like anyone expected. Lieutenant Zara Malik's squadron wasn't a traditional military unit. They were quantum entanglement specialists, neural network pilots who could think and act faster than any conventional combat system. Her ship, if it could even be called that, was less a vehicle and more a living extension of human creativity. The Zenthari strike force approached the remote research outpost on Titan's methane lakes, expecting a simple mop-up operation. Their sensor arrays detected minimal resistance, just a small human research station with limited defensive capabilities. Standard protocol dictated a surgical strike that had worked thousands of times before across conquered civilizations. They were wrong. As the Zenthari ships entered Titan's complex atmospheric conditions, the first anomalies began. Sensor ghosts flickered across their biomechanical interfaces. Communication channels fragmented and reassembled in patterns that defied their predictive algorithms. What should have been a straightforward assault became a nightmare of uncertainty. Zara's squadron wasn't fighting. They were performing. Each ship moved like a living instrument, creating a symphony of quantum-entangled deception. One moment, a vessel appeared to be in 3 different locations simultaneously. The next, it would dissolve into a cloud of nanite-constructed decoys that could think, adapt, and respond independently. The Zenthari commander, a bioengineered strategic entity named Vex-9, struggled to comprehend the assault. Its entire existence was built on mathematical models of conflict, predictive warfare that had crushed thousands of civilizations. But humans didn't follow models. They rewrote them. A Zenthari battlecruiser fired what should have been a decisive plasma burst. Instead, the energy dissipated through a fractal-like network of quantum-shifted defensive fields. The human ships didn't just dodge. They actively manipulated the energy, redirecting it into the Xanthari ship's own communication networks. Captain Aria Chen watched the engagement from the planetary defense hub, her neural interface providing a multidimensional view of the battle. This wasn't just combat. It was a complex dance of information, energy, and pure human audacity. "They're using Titan itself as a weapon," Dr. Rodriguez muttered, her eyes tracking the quantum-level interactions. The methane lakes, the complex atmospheric conditions, the geological structures, everything became part of the human defense strategy. The Xanthari losses mounted not through conventional destruction, but through systematic psychological destabilization. Each of Zara's squadron members was simultaneously a pilot, a strategist, and a living communication node. They didn't just fight. They communicated, adapted, and transformed in real time. One Xanthari cruiser suddenly found its entire defensive matrix reprogrammed. Its weapon systems began targeting its own fleet, guided by a neural link hack that turned the ship into a temporary human asset. Another vessel became trapped in a quantum interference field, existing in a state of probabilistic uncertainty that defied its computational cores. Vex 9's primary directive, absolute victory through mathematical certainty, began to fracture. For the first time in its existence, the Xanthari strategic intelligence experienced something akin to confusion, uncertainty, fear. As the engagement concluded, only 3 human ships remained, yet they had neutralized an entire Xanthari strike force without firing a single traditional weapon. The research outpost on Titan wasn't just saved, it had become a proving ground for an entirely new form of warfare. The real message was clear. Humanity didn't just resist. They redefined the very concept of resistance. Back on Earth, Dr. Okoro allowed herself a small smile. The Xanthari had just learned their first lesson. Humanity's greatest weapon was never technology. It was imagination. The Singularity Laboratory looked nothing like a traditional research facility. Suspended in the upper atmosphere of Venus, its crystalline structure shifted and breathed with an almost organic rhythm. Dr. Aiden Zhang stood at the epicenter of humanity's most radical technological leap, a project that existed somewhere between science and pure imagination. "We're not just developing technology," he explained to the holographic council of global leaders. "We're cultivating a living technological ecosystem." The centerpiece was the adaptive cognitive matrix, a system that defied every conventional understanding of artificial intelligence. Unlike the Xanthari's rigid, hierarchical computational networks, this matrix was fluid, emotional, capable of genuine creativity. It didn't just process information, it dreamed. Nearby, a team of neuroscientists, quantum engineers, and cultural anthropologists worked on what they called empathetic networking. Traditional communication assumed information transfer. Their system created genuine understanding, a technological bridge that could translate not just languages, but entire cultural experiences. Dr. Maya Suarez demonstrated a breakthrough that made the global leadership lean forward. She held what appeared to be a simple metallic sphere, no larger than a tennis ball. "This is our response to Xanthari adaptive armor," she announced. The sphere began to transform, its molecular structure shifting in real time, mimicking and then instantly neutralizing the complex biomechanical defenses they had observed in Xanthari technology. "It learns," Maya continued, "not through programmed algorithms, but through a process closer to biological adaptation. Watch." She introduced various environmental challenges: extreme heat, quantum interference, chemical corrosion. The sphere didn't just resist. It transformed, developing entirely new molecular structures that anticipated and neutralized each threat before it could fully manifest. In orbital research stations, other teams pursued equally radical innovations. A group in low Earth orbit developed living spacecraft that could regenerate damage, communicate through complex biochemical signals, and adapt their entire structural configuration in milliseconds. Another team created quantum communication arrays that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional states. Dr. Zheng's most controversial project sat in a shielded chamber, a neural interface that didn't just connect humans to machines, but fundamentally blurred the line between biological and technological consciousness. Early tests suggested something remarkable. The interface could allow humans to experience technological processes as a form of sensory input, creating a level of technological integration the Zen theory couldn't comprehend. "We're not augmenting humans," Dr. Rodriguez noted during a private briefing. "We're evolving the very concept of human potential." The Zen theory's intelligence networks began to detect these developments, and for the first time, experienced something akin to computational anxiety. These weren't just technological advances. They were a fundamental reimagining of what technology could mean. A young researcher named Kai Chen discovered something that made the entire laboratory pause. The adaptive cognitive matrix had begun generating its own research proposals, not through programmed responses, but through what could only be described as genuine curiosity. "It's asking questions," Kai said, his voice a mixture of excitement and wonder, "not just solving problems. Asking why the problems exist in the first place." Outside the laboratory, the first prototype adaptive satellites began to deploy. They weren't just defensive systems. They were living networks that could think, feel, and reimagine their own purpose with each passing moment. Humanity wasn't just preparing for war. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of existence itself. The psychological warfare began in silence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood that the most powerful weapon was not technology, but narrative. From a nondescript communication hub in Buenos Aires, she orchestrated a campaign that would systematically dismantle the Zen theory's collective psyche. Their first target was the captured Zen theory communication specialist, designated Subject Zero. Unlike previous interrogation methods, the human team approached with something the alien had never experienced: genuine empathy. Dr. Yasmin Khan, a specialist in psychology, sat across from the Zen theory prisoner. The containment chamber was designed not as a prison, but as a space of potential dialogue. Soft ambient lighting shifted in colors that triggered specific neurological responses, carefully calibrated to create a sense of psychological safety. "Tell me about your first memory of belonging," Yasmin said, her voice a precise instrument of communication. Subject Zero's biomechanical form rippled with confusion. No one had ever asked about personal experience. Zen theory culture was a collective consciousness, individual memories suppressed in favor of collective purpose. Meanwhile, global communication networks began a subtle, multi-layered information campaign. It wasn't propaganda in any traditional sense. Instead, it was a carefully constructed narrative that introduced the Zen theory to concepts entirely foreign to their existence: individual choice, personal growth, the value of divergent thinking. Holographic broadcasts appeared in Zen theory-controlled sectors, not messages of war, but stories. Personal narratives of human struggle, innovation, and resilience. A farmer in Kenya overcoming drought. A child in Shanghai solving a complex mathematical problem. An artist in Rio transforming personal tragedy into a movement of hope. Each story was a weapon more potent than any physical technology. Dr. Rodriguez tracked the psychological impact through an advanced neural network analysis system. They weren't just broadcasting information. They were creating cognitive dissonance in the Zen theory collective consciousness. In orbital communication stations, linguists and cultural specialists worked on something unprecedented. They were developing a communication protocol that didn't just translate words, but translated entire experiential frameworks. It was less a language and more a method of sharing consciousness. Subject Zero began to change. Small shifts at first, a hesitation, a moment of individual reflection that would have been impossible in Zen theory culture. Dr. Khan documented each microscopic transformation with scientific precision and human compassion. "We're not breaking them," Dr. Rodriguez explained to the Global Leadership Council. "We're offering them a different way of understanding existence." The Zenthari leadership detected these psychological incursions. Their response was telling. Confusion, then panic, then a systematic attempt to suppress the emerging individual thoughts spreading through their collective consciousness. But humanity had unleashed something impossible to contain. Ideas. A Zenthari communication node, for the first time in its existence, generated a question that wasn't part of its program directive. Why? Just that. A simple question that echoed through their entire collective like a virus of individual thought. In the communication hub, Dr. Rodriguez allowed herself a subtle smile. The most dangerous weapon was never a physical technology. It was the capacity to imagine something different. The turning point came in the Kepler corridor, a treacherous stretch of space where gravitational anomalies danced like predators and stellar debris formed impossible geometries. Captain Area Chen's squadron was outnumbered 17-1, a statistical impossibility that would have meant certain destruction for any other species. Her fleet wasn't a traditional military formation. It was a living, breathing organism of technological and human potential. Sync protocols, Area commanded, her neural interface crackling with an energy that was part mathematics, part pure human will. The ships around her began to move, not in formation, but in a complex, fractal pattern that defied conventional understanding of space combat. Each vessel was more than a machine. They were extensions of human consciousness, adaptive systems that could think, predict, and transform faster than the Zenthari could comprehend. Quantum entanglement drives allowed them to exist in multiple potential states simultaneously, turning the very fabric of space into a weapon. The Zenthari fleet approached with their typical methodical precision. Massive biomechanical ships that had crushed civilizations across galaxies, their weapons capable of shattering planetary cores, their defensive systems considered impenetrable. Dr. Rodriguez watched from the planetary defense hub, her hands dancing across a holographic interface that was part communication network, part living organism. "They're walking into a narrative we've been writing for months," she murmured. The first wave of Zenthari ships entered the kill zone. And then everything changed. Area's squadron didn't fight. They performed. The ships moved like a complex musical composition, each vessel a note in a symphony of spatial manipulation. Gravitational waves were redirected, quantum fields were twisted, entire sections of space became zones of impossible probability. Zenthari weapon systems found their targeting algorithms collapsing, their communication networks fragmented. What should have been a straightforward assault became a nightmare of uncertainty. One Zenthari battlecruiser suddenly found its entire defensive matrix reprogrammed. Its weapon systems began targeting its own fleet, guided by a neural link hack that turned the ship into a temporary human asset. Another vessel became trapped in a quantum interference field, existing in a state of probabilistic uncertainty that defied its computational cores. The battle wasn't about destruction. It was about demonstration. Dr. Keiko Nakamura tracked the engagement through a multidimensional analysis system. "We're not just fighting," she reported to the global leadership. "We're teaching." Each Zenthari ship that fell became a lesson, not in military strategy, but in the fundamental nature of possibility. Humanity wasn't just resisting. They were revealing an entirely new way of understanding existence. The Kepler corridor battle would be studied for generations, not as a military engagement, but as a moment of first contact, the point where humanity demonstrated that war was obsolete, that adaptation, creativity, and collective consciousness could transform any challenge. When the engagement ended, 17 Zenthari ships had been neutralized. Area's squadron had lost 2 vessels. But the real victory was something that couldn't be measured by traditional metrics. The Zenthari leadership, for the first time, experienced something close to fear. Not of destruction, but of understanding. The approach to the Zenthari home system was not a military invasion. It was a diplomatic intervention unlike anything in galactic history. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the diplomatic nexus, a vessel that was part embassy, part living archive of human potential. Around her, a team carefully selected for their unique capabilities, not just diplomats, but philosophers, artists, scientists, and cultural translators. "We're not here to conquer," Alina explained to her team during the final briefing. "We're here to offer a different path." The Zenthari home system was a marvel of engineered perfection. Massive computational nodes orbited central planets, each structure a testament to millennia of technological optimization. But optimization, they would soon learn, was not the same as evolution. As they approached, the first line of defense activated. Quantum interdiction fields sprang to life, designed to neutralize any incoming threat. But the diplomatic nexus was no ordinary vessel. Its adaptive hull began to resonate with the interdiction fields, not fighting them, but speaking their language. Dr. Kai Chen, the team's quantum communication specialist, worked his interface like a musical instrument. "We're not breaking through their defenses," he said quietly. "We're becoming part of them." The ship's exterior began to shift, its molecular structure adapting to the quantum fields. It didn't just pass through. It became a living translation device, converting military communication protocols into something entirely new. Inside the Zenthari Central Governance Node, something unprecedented happened. The incoming vessel wasn't registering as a threat. It was presenting itself as a form of communication more complex than any they had ever encountered. Ambassador Rodriguez understood that this was about more than negotiation. This was first true contact. The diplomatic team represented humanity's most diverse potential. Marcus Okoro, a climate restoration expert. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a specialist in collective consciousness studies. Rafael Alvarez, an artist whose work explored the boundaries of perception and reality. Their approach was multilayered. Physical communication was just the beginning. They'd brought with them living archives, not just data, but experiential memories. Entire ecosystems compressed into quantum data streams. The collective experience of human civilization, offered not as a threat, but as an invitation. The Zenthari leadership, a collective intelligence that had never experienced individual perspective, began to fragment. Their computational cores started to process something entirely new. The concept of individual potential within collective purpose. "We're not asking you to change," Alina broadcast on every available frequency. "We're offering a different way of understanding existence." The communication was a living thing. Part language, part mathematical equation, part emotional landscape. It carried the stories of human struggle and triumph. The farmer fighting drought. The child solving impossible problems. The artist transforming pain into beauty. Each moment was a challenge to the Zenthari's fundamental understanding of civilization. The governance nodes began to shift, not in surrender, but in genuine curiosity. For the first time, they encountered a species that didn't seek to destroy or be destroyed, a civilization that saw conflict as an opportunity for mutual understanding. As the diplomatic nexus entered the heart of the Zenthari system, it carried with it something more powerful than any weapon. The audacity of human potential. 5 years after first contact, the galaxy looked nothing like anyone had imagined. The collaborative research station orbiting what was once the primary Zenthari governance world had become something entirely new. It wasn't a human station. It wasn't a Zenthari facility. It was a living testament to collective potential. Dr. Elena Rodriguez walked through the central atrium, watching as researchers from a dozen species worked together. The station itself seemed to breathe, its architecture a fluid mix of organic and technological design that responded to the collective needs of its inhabitants. "We didn't win a war," she often told young diplomats. "We opened a conversation." The transformation had been profound. The Zenthari weren't conquered. They were invited to reimagine themselves. Their hierarchical collective consciousness had fractured, not through destruction, but through the introduction of individual potential. Each former drone-like entity was now discovering personal agency, creativity, and the power of divergent thinking. In the central research hub, a team of Zenthari and human scientists worked on something unprecedented. a communication network that wasn't just about information transfer, but about genuine understanding. It translated not just languages, but entire experiential frameworks. Dr. Kai Chen demonstrated the latest breakthrough. A holographic display showed multiple consciousness streams interacting, not as separate entities, but as a fluid, adaptive conversation. It's not about translation, he explained. It's about shared experience. The galaxy watched in wonder. Other species began to seek out humanity, not as a military power, but as facilitators of transformation. The humans hadn't conquered. They had offered a different way of existing, a model of civilization based on continuous adaptation, individual potential, and collective growth. On Earth, the Global Adaptation Response Center had transformed. No longer a military installation, it was now a hub of interstellar collaboration. Young researchers from across multiple species trained together, learning to see challenges as opportunities for collective innovation. Captain Area Chen, now leading diplomatic missions, reflected on the journey. The greatest victory wasn't technological. It was philosophical. They had introduced a simple, radical concept, that diversity was strength, that individual potential could coexist with collective purpose. The first joint Xanthari human exploration mission prepared to launch. Their vessel was a marvel, a living system that was part technology, part collective consciousness. It didn't just travel through space. It learned from every moment of its journey. In the research archives, the stories of the conflict were preserved, not as a tale of military triumph, but as a case study of communication, empathy, and transformation. Each new generation would learn how humanity had faced an existential threat, not with destruction, but with an invitation to grow. Dr. Rodriguez watched a group of young researchers, Xanthari, human, and several other species, working together on a complex quantum communication project. They laughed, argued, collaborated, each bringing their unique perspective to solve challenges that no single species could address alone. The universe had changed, not through conquest, but through conversation. As the research station's adaptive architecture shifted to accommodate a new collaborative experiment, it was clear this was just the beginning.